Hello and welcome to the Wine Enthusiast Podcast, your serving of wine trends and passionate people beyond the bottle. I'm Lauren Buzzio, the managing editor at Wine Enthusiast, and in this episode, we're taking a look at what the new year has in store for the craft beer scene. After so much challenge and change in 2020, there's a lot to unpack and consider. Beer editor John Hall guides a conversation with Natalie Chilurzo of Russian River Brewing in California, Samantha Lee of Hopewell Brewing in Chicago, and Paul Leone, director of the New York State Brewers Guild, about the shifts they've seen and encountered over the past year, and exactly what it could all mean for the year of beer ahead. So grab a comfy spot and a cold one, and get ready for an enlightening and informative discussion of all things frothy for 2021.
As we look forward to this year and reflect on what 2020 brought to the beer scene and its lasting impacts, I'm very glad to have this panel of experts, brewery owners, and advocates joining us for this episode. Natalie Chilurzo is the co-owner and president of Russian River Brewing Company in California. Paul Leone is executive director of the New York State's Brewers Association, and Samantha Lee is a co-founder of Hopewell Brewing in Chicago. Thank you all for being here, and Happy New Year to everybody, and here's to good times ahead. I want to just sort of flip the calendar back just a little bit. And when it comes to the beer industry overall, what do you think 2020 is going to be remembered for? And Natalie, let's start with you out on the West Coast.
Sure. Well, I think 2020 was the year of, business owners, brewery owners in particular, having to redefine ourselves and our business models. So I would say just about every brewery in America and probably around the world had to somewhat or completely alter the way they do business, whether it was starting direct to consumer, taking on partnership with food trucks or caterers or other restaurants in order to keep their doors open due to meal requirements here in California, or starting to package for the first time and distribute wholesale. So I think that all breweries, no matter what size, from the smallest of the small to the biggest of the big, really had to pivot and redefine themselves and their businesses this year.
Pivot was one of those 2020 words, certainly.
Yes, overused.
starting to move east. Samantha, what's your take on what 2020 beer-wise is going to be remembered for?
I think a lot of what Natalie said rings true for us as well at Hopewell. That pun, I'm sorry for that. That sometimes slips out.
It's wordplay. It's fine.
I know. I never mean to do it, though.
It's appreciated here.
Yeah, and I think it depends largely on where you sit, whether you're a consumer, whether you own a hospitality business like a restaurant or a bar, or if you're a brewery owner. For us, we saw a lot of deep engagement with the consumer, whether that's direct to consumer, making different styles that we hadn't yet played around with. We saw a lot of that in 2020 so far, that just different breweries of our size as well, just not only pivoting their business model, but also what they produce. And that certainly was true for us. I think we saw a lot of experimentation in 2020, just because folks had a little bit more room to play, at least at our scale. And I think we saw a lot of creativity in how folks get information and share details about their offerings to consumers. It's really been a year where social media has been really important. It has been for a long time, but I think this year really showed us how people utilize social media these days. And, we're relying on that, like the instant information. And it's how we're certainly getting information across to our customer base. And then seasonals, funny enough, I think for us at least, seasonals, and we've noticed this a bit in the market, that consumers are really excited by seasonals. I think there's something about this pandemic where we're all sort of stuck at home and not able to do much. The one thing that you can change is what you're eating and drinking. So we've seen a lot of excitement around new offerings, and particularly as they pertain to holidays or seasons changing.
Yeah, definitely. Last year with Oktoberfest beers, I feel like there's quite a few more on this year, just simply because, or last year, because there was a more people had time to make lagers properly, which was
Mm,
nice. But
mhm.
I think very much what you were saying, and then certainly towards the end of the year last year with some of the big seasonal holiday releases, certainly did gangbusters. I want to talk about consumer preferences in a minute, but first, Paul, I'm curious from your standpoint, running a Brewers Guild, what's going to stand out 2020 wise for you?
Boy, I think the first word that came to mind was survival. And if I can use a baseball analogy, I think breweries were thrown a nearly impossible to hit curveball in 2020. And those that adjusted in the batter's box got through it, and those that didn't, are still struggling a bit. And I am, just like all the Brewers Guilds around the country, we all had to adjust and we all had to find a way. And it's inspirational to see how breweries adjusted, that entrepreneurial spirit, especially here in New York and a lot of other states as well. This is their business. They found a way. And, from a state guild perspective, our jobs was to help them find that way. Even if we can tip the pitch for them, some way or another to help them through this. That was our job. Our job was going from, raising money through beer festivals and marketing to how do we help our members get through this, and here we are, and we're still fighting the fight, but there is a way out. We see a way out. So survival really is kind of the first word that popped into my head.
Mm.
Are there examples that you've seen from some of your member breweries of people who really rose to the occasion, who were able to hit that pitch and almost come
Yeah,
out of this a little bit stronger?
Here in New York, and we and in a lot of other states, we were able to do things like shipping, delivery, home delivery, and curbside pickup, which wasn't legal for most breweries before the pandemic. And so we were given those tools by the governor's office early on and breweries were deemed essential at the very beginning. So they were never fully closed down. And New York is a really big state, and so shipping was new to a lot of the breweries. They had to figure that piece out. And then delivery. So delivery literally saved many breweries in New York City. They have 8 million customers. And so they found a way, and they're still finding a way. And breweries have just been able to adjust through shutdown, opening up a little, having a great summer, back to shutting down again. But they find, any opportunity we can give them to sell their product, then they took advantage of it, and most breweries did.
My conversations with so many brewers across the country last year usually wound up at some point in the conversation with somebody saying, I never thought I would ever have to do X, as a brewery owner. I'm curious, Natalie or Samantha, were there any things that going into the beginning of last year, the beginning of 2020, that were so foreign to you, or that were never on your radar, that you never thought you'd have to do as a brewery owner, that all of a sudden you had to do to survive?
Yeah, I never thought I'd have to furlough 142 employees in the same day.
Yeah.
So that was definitely something that was definitely never ever on our radar. You think of a failing business that has to do something like that. So I would say that one struck me as probably the never ever thing. The other thing that was not really on our radar, more because it wasn't something that we felt that we needed to do, and we didn't really have the desire to do it, was direct to consumer. But when we had to shut down both of our pubs, which was 50% of our total company revenue back in March, 50% of our revenue disappeared in a day, and which isn't bad compared to smaller breweries like Samantha's and thousands of other breweries around the country where 100% of their revenue is direct to consumer right over the bar in their small tap rooms and stuff. And so we were able to adjust pretty quickly to start putting all of our beer into cans and bottles and do a direct to consumer. And so in California, it is legal. It was already legal to ship intrastate to customers throughout the state of California. As you know, it's pretty illegal to ship out of state, but we have 40 million people in the state of California, and so we had a pretty big audience of beer lovers already. And so when we started shipping direct to consumer online, it was a hit, like right out of the gate, and it saved our butts because we were kind of freaking out about not being able to pay our bills, especially here after building a beautiful brewery with 4 loan payments every month. So yeah, I would say those are my top 2 things. The furloughing all those people, which we had to do again last week because outdoor dining shut down, but this time it was only 42 employees. And then the direct to consumer, which ended up saving us.
Samantha, what about you?
So we lost 50% of our revenue because a lot of our business is really selling drafts to bars and restaurants in Chicago.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, that's a really, that we built our business on that with the assumption and the belief that having a strong draft presence in your local market is really important. People make good memories having draft beer at their favorite bar. So that's how we really built our business, and we're so thankful that we bought our canning line 2 years ago. Businesses like ours who don't have that really struggled. And I didn't realize that going into our 5th year, we're turning 5 in February, that we would be scrambling so much, honestly, to figure out how to avoid certain contingencies. And so we honestly are here with our doors, so to speak, open, because we received the PPP loan, because we received an economic injury disaster loan, we got a city grant, we got another city loan. So those 4 things are why we have people employed at all. I think, we pivoted and we hustled, but those were so small and incremental that we really needed the government assistance. And I didn't think that would happen. Obviously that's not something that you ever think will happen or plan for. But we were really optimistic about our 2020. We had plans, we had hiring plans, we had all these ideas on what maybe a second location could look like, maybe a different retail component. But instead we're very much in a maintenance and hopefully resiliency in 2021 mode. So that's totally unexpected, not something we loved doing, having tough conversations with our landlord. But ultimately those were really great, because I think when you're in a bad relationship with your landlord as a small business, that can really be the end of you. We've seen that a lot in Chicago, a lot of restaurants and bars having to close for that reason. Breweries also getting into some really tough situations for that reason. So, these are not the worries that I thought we would have, turning 5 soon.
Chicago is such a great beer drinking city to begin with. And I think your original model of serving the bars of a major metropolitan area made sense. Given the closures, given the uncertainty, I mean, there's a vaccine being rolled out. People, I think, are being cautiously optimistic and hopeful that at some point we can get back to some sort of life, as it were. What's your sense from talking with folks around Chicago in the hospitality industry of when things might, I don't know, feel like they did in 2019, or can they ever again?
Yeah. From conversations with folks, anecdotally, it seems that people feel comfortable about, honestly, fall 2021. Summer, we can expect people to receive vaccines. Thankfully, I know a handful of people who work in healthcare who've received vaccines, and I'm so excited that that's happening.
Yeah.
But in terms of safety, right, we'll probably enter phased openings of bars and restaurants, similar to what we saw in the summer, where people had phased approaches. Hopefully in a new administration, it's a little bit more cohesive about how the entire country does it, just because, borders are porous, people travel, people go on road trips, people are from other places. So hopefully there's sort of a shared understanding of what those procedures are. But, I guess the way I think about it is like, well, when am I going to the next wedding? And
Yeah.
probably the fall. So we're crossing our fingers. The stimulus bill that just passed, I'm hoping that buys everyone a little bit more time. Um, it's just it's hopeful, but I think I tend to be a little bit pessimistic when it comes to these things. So, or at least I'm trying to prepare for a worst case scenario. And for us, that would be not being able to reopen
Yeah.
until late summer. And just, I'd like for our business to reflect that. So that our projections and our planning, that's how we're planning, at least, is that we're not opening until late summer.
Paul, what are you projecting to your members right now about what this year could bring?
I think right now we're mentally, trying to prepare them that things are still not great and that things are probably going to get worse before they get better, without sounding doom and gloom about it, but realistic. But we're really trying to be as encouraging as possible. I think I worry a lot about the breweries in this state and everything they've gone to, just their mental state through all of this, what they must be going through. I mean, Natalie mentioning like having to lay off, all of those people like that, in the brewing industry, and I'm sure Samantha as well, like you love these people. They're just not employees. And they love you. Like, I mean, these are like family. And so, breweries have gone through so much. And so right now we're just, trying to be there for them, always have been. You pick up the phone and call me sort of thing. Don't worry about an email or any of that, and be as responsive as possible because they need that. And so we're basically saying, just a few more months, and the sun will start coming out a little bit, and we will get through this. Just hang on a little bit longer, and then that moves over to some of the legislative action that we plan to take to help them along as well. So we're trying to be as encouraging as possible, but as realistic as possible as well, so they can plan better.
Yeah.
And canning, the can shortage is still another issue, and for those that shut down, as we saw earlier, packaged product is what sells. That's all they have to sell. So, just trying to stay on top of everything for them. The more that we can think about for them and have answers to their questions, I think that the better they'll be prepared to get through this. But right now, we don't want everybody to say, hey, this is over just yet, just a few more months.
Natalie, I'm curious from your standpoint of losing 50% of the business through the two pubs, people coming and drinking there, but you've been able to ramp up what you've been putting out in cans and bottles, and you have a new beer club that's out there that'll be getting beer to people, and you've been able to have your beer on more shelves than previous. Is that something that will continue, do you think, through 2021? Or if you're able to reopen the pubs, do you pull back on some of the things that you implemented out of necessity?
No, I don't think so. I think that we were really lucky because we were already in a position where we're already packaging, we're already distributing wholesale, and we were able to just shift, basically revenue streams. So wholesale sales went up pretty quickly with craft beer for those of us who were already distributing, just because of the pantry loading that was going on at the time. So we were super grateful for that. We're starting to see a dip in that right now. I think people are running out of unemployment money. Maybe they're getting back to work. They're not drinking as much. Maybe they just don't have any more room in their fridge. I'm not sure. Probably all these things.
That's where I'm at. All three of those right now.
Yeah, right. Exactly. There's a lot. What's the joke? I think it's the COVID 20. I think everybody's talking about, they put on 20 pounds during shelter in place. And so they're like, okay, I need to cut back on my beer intake. But, I think we're pretty happy with the way we now have different buckets of revenue streams. And I feel like, it's safer that way. So, we're pretty set up. So in the event that something happens with direct to consumer, for example, and all of a sudden, we weren't able to ship beer direct to consumer for a while, we would still have wholesale in our pubs. And then if something were to happen, again with the pubs, and at least we would have these other two channels. So I'm pretty happy with the way things are going, and I feel a little more diversified, if you will. And like we don't have all of our eggs in one basket. I was actually thinking, I think I was thinking yesterday. So Vinny and I finished building our new brewery here in Windsor just 2 years ago. It's been a really interesting 2 years with wildfires and evacuations and floods and global
you're not very far
pandemics.
from Napa and the fires
No,
that
well,
have
we had another fire.
Sonoma.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, we have fires every year. We evacuate almost every year. We almost burned down last year. That was horrible. But just had we not, if this pandemic had happened before Vinny and I were able to finish building our new brewery, we would be in way worse shape, because 74% of our revenue in 2017 came from our downtown Santa Rosa brew pub, and the rest of it was through wholesale distribution. And that's all we had. And we were a much smaller company at the time. And we weren't packaging very much beer, and our bottling line at the time was pretty darn slow. And so we would not have been able to make the adjustments we did so quickly to basically just save ourselves. And so I was just thinking about this week, and how lucky we are with the timing of this, but how so many other breweries were just not lucky. And we've been there. We've been that size. I don't know how many barrels Samantha makes, but I know she's pretty small, and just having to shut down that retail, that higher margin component of your business when you're really relying on that to pay the bills is really stressful. Yeah, I'm just feeling pretty lucky these days, that we were able to adjust in 2020, and like some of the changes that we made, which we will continue to do in 2021.
I think practicing gratitude is one of those things that in and around hospitality, even with how bleak it is, if you can find some things to be grateful for, that's a nice thing to hang your hat on. Samantha, early on in this show, you mentioned exploration, and then Natalie was just talking about being diversified in the company offerings. But I'm curious as to consumer preferences, and because you were dealing with the public on a daily basis over your bar, for the 5 years before this pandemic, the 4 years before this pandemic, and then certainly over the last 10 months or so, did you see a shift in what your regulars were looking for, or what maybe even the casual beer consumer was looking for during the pandemic, beer wise?
Yeah, sure. So our business, because we built it on strong draft, and selling at really the standby bars that you go to on a weekly basis in the city. That means we sold a lot of our first pills and Ride or Die Pale Ale. Those are two of our flagships. We still sell a lot of those beers, but for the folks who are shopping, either through our store or through their mom and pop liquor stores around town, it seems to us, they are looking for something new and different, whether that's seasonal, whether that's hoppy, whether that's, the stout of the season. We've been releasing more new beers now than we ever imagined. I mean, I should have counted this before hopping on this podcast with you all, but I mean, I think we're releasing a new beer, at least one each week, sometimes two. And so our brew house is extremely busy. We're not putting out as much volume as we anticipated, but we're doing so many turns. Our canning line is just running nonstop. We are thankfully taking a week off coming up soon. We all need it, but yeah, it seems that whatever is new is really doing well, basically. We put out a winter lager recently, sort of in the vein of a Vienna lager,
Ooh,
and it went gangbusters. That was maybe the surprise of the season for us. It's a style that always does pretty well on draft for us in the tap room. It's a good tap room beer. It's a good beer bar beer.
yeah.
But to see it fly off the shelves like that was really fun and interesting. But I think, that also happens with we put out a West Coast style IPA. We put out, we're doing hazy IPAs for the first time ever. And it's always popular. And it's hard to tell if it's because hoppy's always popular or because it's new and interesting and people are sort of treating their refrigerators like a craft bar.
Yeah. Well, in talking to your members, did you start to glean off any sort of consumer trends that happened during the first months of COVID or the first year of COVID?
Consumer trends, yeah, everybody was buying packaged beer for sure. In terms of styles, I think I'll echo a little bit of what Samantha just said. The lighter styles were flying off the shelves, and I think a lot of breweries were also finding time to collaborate with each other that had never gotten together just to come up with something new and different. But everybody was right. It really seemed like consumers were just like, well, what can I try? What can I, what's new? And and with shipping being allowed direct to consumer, which had never been allowed before, it opened up the market to a lot of breweries, and people were ordering things from breweries that they couldn't get beer from. And so the tastes got really wide and varied. Of course, being here in New York, the hazy IPA is always the winner when it comes to the most beer sold. But the lighter styles definitely lower alcohol, where a lot of people were just consuming a lot of beer, a lot of that style of beer.
One of the biggest stories last year in 2020, and that will continue, I think, is the American political landscape. And when I first started covering beer, maybe about 20 years or so ago, I remember people saying the three things you never talk about at the bar are sex, politics, and religion. And these days, it seems like it's nearly impossible not to talk about politics. And in fact, many breweries have taken political stances. Many breweries have entered into the political arena, and because that's just what this world calls for these days. And Natalie, I know your brewery in 2020 put out a Pliny for President IPA, which got a lot of attention, and most people with a fractured two-party system would have been eager to vote for your beer for the highest office in the land. But I'm sort of curious, and Paul, certainly in New York State, New York saw a lot of protests over the summer after the murder of George Floyd. Buffalo was a hotspot for a lot of the various social justice protests that were happening, and breweries were getting involved. Beer is a unifier in a lot of ways. Beer doesn't know politics, it doesn't know sex, it doesn't know religion or creeds. What's the role that beer is playing in our national political conversation, or even our local political conversation? And Samantha, I'll start with you, just because I know that your brewery has been in your tap room has been a place where people can gather and talk about these things.
Yeah. I think one of the ways that we think about our place in current politics is what sphere do we hold power as a company? And we employ people, albeit we have 10 employees, but we do employ people, and we sell to other businesses. We have somewhat of a platform. So in those realms where we do have power, how are we using that power? How are we choosing to support workers? If we claim to love our employees and rely on them, then we need to be sure that we do that through providing health insurance, that they have a living wage, better than a living wage, that things like that, where these are the areas that we can enact change, that we can actually participate. In terms of culture and politics, the three of us, so Stephen, my husband, and then our good friend Jonathan, are progressive, and our small business is just a reflection of our personal politics. We don't try to be anything we're not. We're not a nonprofit. But we do try to elevate the social justice organizations that do important work in our communities. So whether that's through collecting pantry items, whether that's through donating our profits to an organization. Our goal whenever we're engaging in politics and in social justice is not to elevate our own voice in this movement, but it's to rather really highlight the organizations that do the work and make sure that our followers, the people who do trust us and trust our voice, that they divert their resources to those organizations. And we know that that's not for everyone. And maybe that's the benefit for us of, one, being in Chicago, and two, being a small business. We're not like a multi-billion-dollar corporation that has, that relies on the entire country. We have sort of the privilege of really being able to cultivate our community, and that's been a really rewarding thing for me personally. But I think, yeah, that's just our approach, and it's not always right for everyone. We've gotten this question a lot basically since we've opened of how do you handle this? Like, what happens if your customer base doesn't like your political stance? And honestly, this has happened maybe once or twice. And in these times where it is very fractured, and in our opinion, there's one side that is exclusionary and hateful, right? And that's the side that we don't need to be on.
It's a difficult needle to thread, I think, for businesses, because, for small businesses or businesses of any size, like, you don't want to lose customers, and you want people to believe in your product. And, Natalie, I'm sort of curious, because Pliny for President, when you put that out, wasn't necessarily a political statement. But I know some people sort of took it that way.
Yeah, it's funny. Pliny runs for president every 4 years, and so this is the 4th time Pliny's run for president, and it's always been a tongue-in-cheek, just kind of fun way to just draw attention to an election. And it's just something fun that we like to do every year. We certainly don't ask people to throw their vote away and write Pliny in, this year in particular.
Yeah.
So we did make that clear, like, hey, this is just a joke. This is just for fun, people. We kind of feel like we needed to bring a little extra levity to a rather dark and stressful year. And so Vinny and I had already decided we were going to brew a beer called Pliny for President in 2020 before the pandemic hit. And then, when it became very clear that nothing was opening up anytime soon, we thought, well, you know what, we better brew this beer and we better start shipping it out to people, because we don't know if and when we're ever going to reopen, and B, we think that people will really like it, and we think it's fun. And so that's really, it wasn't a political statement in any way. I mean, Pliny runs for the keg party. His running mate is Blind Pig. His platform is Hop Care for Everyone. So it's just a joke. It's just for fun. And I think a lot of people.
It's delicious.
Yes, thank you. It is delicious.
We got the package. We loved it.
It was so popular.
Lucky.
It's
lucky.
It's double dry hopped Pliny the Elder. And so it's basically it's Pliny the Elder, but double dry hopped, and it ended up being a really good beer. And so it was so popular. People were so excited about it. We got so many nice emails and comments on social media, and just people just like, thank you so much. This was like a bright spot in a very dark time in my life, and it was fun. And so I think it just accomplished what we set out to do. And it also drew a lot of attention to a very important election year, not just with the president, but we had a lot of very important initiatives and local measures and stuff here in California, and I think it did what we had intended it to do, and it was just for fun. And Pliny will run again in the next 4 years.
Paul, from your standpoint, though, it's politics is such a part of the job that you have as an executive director of a state brewers guild, and it's working with state legislatures, it's working with local municipalities in some cases for the betterment of your brewery members. And 2020, you mentioned this earlier, we started to see shipping, we started to see curbside pickup, direct to consumer. A lot of the laws that were in place in 2019 were temporarily suspended to help breweries, which were then deemed essential businesses, survive and keep their doors open. And New York is not alone in this. We saw multiple other states around the country. As you start to think about, or multiple other states around the country do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And as you think about 2021, and if we're thinking fall or winter, or when the vaccine is out and things start to return to quote unquote normal, it's going to be hard to put some of that toothpaste back in the tube, because you've seen that it worked, right? And a lot of the changes that happened, local guilds are trying to make these now permanent, right? And working with state legislatures to do that.
Yeah, I think, direct to consumer is not just a New York thing, and there are several states that have it already. And I know here in New York, we fully plan on pursuing direct to consumer for our breweries in our state. I also know it's going to be a national initiative with the Brewers Association, mm-hmm. with the BA as well. There are our New York State, as well as many other states, benefited from direct to consumer. And I think in this day and age, we should be able to have that. It's certainly not going to cut into the wholesaler's bottom line, but with that said, we understand the wholesalers' concerns, at least here in New York State. We do value them. They are good partners to many breweries. But direct to consumer, we need to have that tough conversation of how do we make it palatable for them and for the breweries in our state. So that conversation is coming in New York, and I think in many other states as well. Breweries really adjusted to direct consumer on a dime. They turned on a dime and they figured it out to now tell them, after they've lost 60% of their on-premise accounts, and they've lost so much in so many other ways, that they can no longer do direct to consumer, is wrong. You just can't put that genie back in the bottle. As you say, you just can't at this point. It would be unfair to do that. So it's certainly a battle we're ready to have here in New York State. And we hope that it's not a battle. We hope to have that great partner conversation with the wholesalers in the state. And, we can come to an agreement one way or another for our breweries.
Yeah, Samantha or Natalie, in your respective states, Illinois, California, have there been changes that you're hoping to see become permanent, temporary suspensions that you hope to see become permanent?
We could start West Coast. I like that. I like that.
Yeah. We'll start on the West. We're very lucky. Craft brewers are very lucky in the state of California, and we have a lot of privileges. We are allowed to do direct to consumer. We're also allowed to self-distribute as well as use third-party wholesalers. We are able to have brew pubs. We're able to sell packaged beer and draft beer over the bar to consumers, and so we're very fortunate within the state of California. I would say that some of the things that that the ABC, the Department of ABC here in California, relaxed a lot of restrictions, like most state alcohol associations did, and so I think just by them allowing us to be able to buy beer back from closed accounts, letting restaurants and bars sell packaged beer, wine, and cocktails to go, delivery of alcohol, things like that, I think really help the retail side of things, not necessarily us, but certainly many of our accounts, which then helps us as well. So I would say that retailers are probably going to go after keeping some of those privileges. I'm not sure that the ABC will be too hot on the idea of cocktail delivery or cocktails to go, but they might
Yeah.
allow some other things like being able to sell packaged beer and wine to go, and stuff like that. So I would definitely see that as something that the retailers and bars and restaurants are going to want to stick around. And then as far as direct to consumer, I totally agree with Paul. This is probably there was a lot of genies let out of the bottle in 2020, but I would say in 2021, you're going to see direct to consumer restrictions throughout the nation start to relax a lot more. And something that the wine industry started a long, long time ago, they are so far ahead of us, and I think we can catch up pretty quickly, because you can buy wine. Most of the wineries are here in the state of California, but most wineries are able to direct ship out of state into most states throughout the United States, but breweries can't. There's only about 10 states that we're allowed to direct ship to. California is not one of them. So I would think that we would probably go after legislation to remove that restriction so that California could be a state that breweries could ship into. And we just need to do that state by state by state in order to lift these rules so that we can start to ship throughout the United States, interstate. Intrastate is so important. And I know, like New York, I really hope that you guys get to keep that privilege, because that's key for the small brewers. Us larger brewers, I mean, we're not a huge brewery, but we distribute a lot of beer. And so, it's really important to us, but it's not a make or break. We're not going to go out of business if we weren't able to sell direct to consumer. But there are so many breweries that literally would have gone out of business in 2020 if they were not able to adjust their businesses and go direct to consumer. So I think that's a really, really important topic that's going to be talked about throughout 2021 for sure.
What about locally for you, Samantha?
Yeah, so we are not able actually to ship beer in Illinois at the moment. We can't even get wine delivered, I believe. So that's definitely one of the things that my business partner, Jonathan, sits on our guild here in Illinois on the board. And so he's been
Great guild.
really, what's that?
It's a great guild.
It's a great guild. Yes, I actually was just reading the guild letter this morning that outlined the
California
stimulus.
and Illinois. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. So we've really leaned on them heavily during this time, just to like parse their legislation for us and help us figure out what can we do, what are we allowed to do. So that's one of the big pieces that we would love to see here in Illinois is the direct consumer shipping. We get asked about it all the time, and it would be amazing, like Natalie said, if state by state we could offer that to folks across the country. Similarly here, we do have some relaxed rules around cocktail to go and growler fills to go, that kind of thing, from our retail partners, which again, like when they do well, we do well. So we're hopeful that they're able to continue to do those kinds of things moving forward. And we offer home delivery now. So that was one of the things that the ILCC, the Illinois Liquor Control Commission, relaxed. We, as a small brewery, can do home deliveries, and other breweries can too, even if you are with a wholesaler, which we self-distribute in the state. So that's been, a small part of our business, but as it gets cold out, people do rely on it. And it's a nice offering for folks, especially if they're unable to shop in person. So that's something that I imagine it will get lifted. It seems that that's not something that will last beyond the pandemic, but it's a nice offering, and we'd love to continue to offer it for folks, but we'll see. I'm not overly optimistic about it, but I am hoping that some of the rules around to-go alcohol for retailers are relaxed.
Being mindful of the time here and asking you to look into your crystal ball, as hazy as an IPA as it might be, I'm curious what 21 2021 holds, aside from what we've already talked about and mentioned. What would you like to see, or what would you like to see accomplished this year? And Paul, I'll start with you on the East Coast, and then we'll work our way west.
What would we like to see accomplished in 2021?
Yeah, that we haven't already talked about. What
I would love to see.
What's a good goal?
I would, in New York State, anyway, we were afraid of that 20% loss of breweries, if more. We've been really holding steady. We've actually seen, close to 20 open in New York State during this. And so I think for 2021, I'm really hoping that breweries can just hang on. That's our hope right now, is that they can just hang on and get through this, and that legislatively we can make the changes that we need to, that they can just keep on keeping on, and I just, that's what I'm hoping. They've been through so much, breweries all around the country, so much. And for them to go out in the home stretch just doesn't seem fair. So that's our hope for 2021, is that we can still be there for them any way they need us, and we can help them legislatively or as a guild continue to give them the information they need to get through this.
Samantha, what about you?
Yeah, I'm going to echo a lot of that. I'm not hoping for really more than surviving the rest of 2021, or making it to the end of 2021 and thinking, "Whew, we made it." And again, I would love to see our peers in the industry continue to survive. No one's thriving right now, but when folks lose jobs, when folks lose their businesses, it's just, it hurts each time we hear about it. I live 3 blocks away from Hopewell, and I walk up and down the street, a couple times a day. And I see the different signs that restaurants and bars are closed, or not going to reopen. And so that's, not just breweries, but I hope that extends to all small businesses, and seeing some relief for the workers who keep these businesses running. I mean, that's something that I would love to see out of 2021, that we don't lose the people who keep all of these industries going. And I hope that we keep everyone on our staff. That's 2021. I hope to see by the end of this year, that we have everyone with us, and that we can look back on it and shed a tear and then keep moving forward. But that's definitely the mentality we've got right now.
Natalie, you able to take us out on a positive note?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, 2021 is about hope. We ended 2020 with a vaccine. It sounds like we may all know people who were vaccinated, already. And I feel like we have a lot of hope for 2021. I would like to see stability. I think these openings and closings and openings and closings is very tiresome, and I would really like to see more stability within not just the nation, but within the states, and also down to the municipality level. It is almost harder for businesses to open and close repeatedly, and having to staff up and then lay everybody off and then staff up again. And then for breweries in particular, we make beer, and beer, you can't just turn on a faucet. You have to plan production. You have to plan distribution. You have to plan for, how many beers you're going to have on tap in your tap room. It's really complicated. It's not like we can just call a supplier and say, okay, guess what? I'm reopening again on Monday. Can you have all of these things delivered to me by Friday? And then have the weekend to prepare. We don't have that luxury. And so I'd really like to see more stability, and I'd really like to see local governments having more regard to businesses and how difficult it is for us to operate with all of this uncertainty and this basically this yo-yo that I feel like we're all hanging out the end of. And I really like to see that. And I really want to see more reopening of businesses that maybe were struggling and thought they weren't going to make it. But I really hope that many of those businesses can just hang on just a little bit longer. And I really want to see people get back to work. And I know people are just tired of being unemployed and tired of the uncertainty. And so those are kind of the things that I would like to see accomplished sooner than later in 2021. But I think we're getting there. I feel like there's hope on the horizon. 2021 has to be a better year than 2020.
Here's
Definitely.
hoping.
Amen. to that.
It can't be
Natalie-
Nowhere
less
to
than
go but
happy.
up.
Amen.
Natalie Chilers of Russian River Brewing, Samantha Lee of Hopewell Brewing in Chicago, and Paul Leone of the New York State Brewers Association. My thanks to you three for coming on and sharing your perspective and talking beer in 2021.
Thank
you
so
for
much.
having me.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Samantha.
Nice to
Yeah,
chat with you
nice-
guys.
Yeah, nice to chat with you.
While there was a lot of chaos to the drinks world and craft beer in 2020, it sounds like there was also some industry evolution that happened as a result. That should impact not only what you have in your glass for the year ahead, but almost as importantly, how you can keep it filled with a wide array of pours. From exciting new releases and sensational seasonals to the hopes of better distribution and even improved direct-to-consumer access, there's so much promise for the year ahead for independent or craft beer lovers, and that's something that we can all raise a glass to. Subscribe to the Wine Enthusiast podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you find podcasts. And if you like today's episode, we'd love to read your review and hear what you think. And hey, why not tell your wine and beer-loving friends to check us out too? You can also drop us a line at podcast@winemag.com. For more wine reviews, recipes, guides, deep dives, and stories, visit Wine Enthusiast online at winemag.com and connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Wine Enthusiast. The Wine Enthusiast podcast is produced by Lauren Buzzio and Jenny Groza. Until next episode, cheers.